everybody. Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 325. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, it's Luis Scott-Vargas, LSV. How goes, sir?
It goes well. I'm, home for a couple weeks since the Pro Tour, which means that I'm kind of itching to get to a tournament, and tomorrow heading to Houston to do some coverage, so that should be fun.
I'll meet you there. Should be fun. Yeah, a little bit of standard in Houston, and then the following weekend, Detroit. That'll be fun too.
Rise the Eldrazi.
Yes, re-rise, if you will. So we've got a level up topic for the show this week where we're going to be talking about, we're going to kind of deconstruct a draft from beginning to end. Not a specific one, but a generalized draft and what you should be thinking about and what your goals are for each stage of a draft. We thought this would be useful. Before we get to that, of course, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you every week by channelfireball.com. This is the place to go for content about Magic on the internet. If you need to find out sideboard guides, if you want to find out anything about what the new hot tech is for draft strategies or constructed strategies, you can find it at Channel Fireball. Of course, you can also get a full selection of singles, sealed product, and supplies there. You can even get apparel. They've got it all at Channel Fireball. I highly recommend checking it out. And of course, if you want to trade in your cards, you can do that too. They offer a generous bonus for trade-ins if you want to get cards back or sealed product back, or you can even just turn them into cold hard cash. You can do that all on Channel Fireball. Also, the show is brought to you by you via the Patreon. You can donate directly to the show there, and you get some cool perks. You can find out all about it at patreon.com/limitedresources. And of course, that also opens you up to the question of the week thread. And we've got kind of an interesting one here, Luis. I thought it's not quite directly related to Magic. It's a little bit more related to you and I and the career paths that we've chosen. It comes from Neil Logan. Neil says, "Hey guys, do you guys feel that you're slightly less critical of a bad Magic set due to both having a vested interest in the game? For example, putting out the opinion that a set is bad could cause there to be lower card sales at Channel Fireball. That goes for both of us." He says, you've both also been employed by Wizards for coverage and that kind of thing. Does the idea of speaking negatively about the product of a potential employer affect how you publicly talk about a set? And then also, he imagines that we both have a bunch of friends at Wizards of the Coast as well that work in the building where, if we were overly critical of a set, we might, hurt some of our friends' feelings, which is lame. But, I thought this is a good question because I bet you other listeners have wondered about this. When you look at you and I, Luis, and how we've kind of positioned ourselves within Magic, that is true. We both work for Wizards of the Coast for varying things, writing columns and doing and doing coverage and that kind of thing. And we're also both affiliated with Channel Fireball. Of course, you're, deeply affiliated with them, and I am too. I wear my Channel Fireball shirt, and I'm proud to be part of the Channel Fireball family. And so I think this is an interesting question for him to ask, and I'll start by answering it. And the truth of it is that, I feel like I don't pull punches. What you're getting is my normal demeanor for this type of stuff. You can go back and listen to older episodes of Limited Resources before I had anything to do with anybody other than just the show itself, when it wasn't sponsored, when there wasn't anything going on. And you'll find that my tone and the things that I say are pretty similar to the way that I do now. Basically because I view integrity within the community as a very important thing. I feel like if I started pulling a lot of punches and not telling things like I thought that they were, then I would lose credibility. Basically, you would say, well, why would I listen to you, right? Because the things that you're saying could easily just be tainted by the fact that, somebody who writes some of your paychecks doesn't want you to say it. But I have lines with that. I do. I'm willing certainly to, take my opinions and make sure that I'm tempered about them and not, go flying off the handle on Twitter about something that bothers me. I'm not going to do that. But the truth is that's just not my demeanor anyway. And so, for me, it means that I don't really have to change things. If I came to a point where I was really frustrated or whatever, I would say it. And I have, frankly. I mean, I've done draft videos where I was pretty frustrated with Magic Online, and I let that show. And I know, that some of the people in the building didn't like that very much, but I felt like, look, I needed to, I'm a normal customer too, and I have to let these things vent sometimes. So, I think for me, it kind of comes naturally to not be like that. And also, yeah, I mean, like, it just doesn't, like, my personality's never been one to just go spout off on, the different platforms that I have. What about for you, Luis? Because you're such a tilt box when you're not on the podcast.
Yeah, I agree. Basically, the way I see it, and this isn't even just confined to Magic or, this particular aspect of the things I do. I've just found that being negative is just not that good. Like, I don't understand what the benefit of it is exactly. Like, I do know that sometimes in the moment it feels good to say something when you're frustrated or whatever. And
yeah,
that's happened to me too. I'm not saying I've never done that, but in general, like, the reason I don't tend to say negative things is because I just don't think it helps the world. Like, there's a big difference between being negative and being constructive and being realistic. Like, I think that, again, like you said, my personality is such that I wouldn't necessarily, if I thought I didn't like something, I wouldn't necessarily, go on full bore about why it's terrible. So that doesn't change. Like, again, I haven't always been affiliated with Wizards or Channel Fireball or what have you. But I do think that, like, I strive to be diplomatic in general because
exactly.
I've just found that just ends up being better for everyone. Like, if I think something is terrible, I'm much more likely to look for reasons why it's not, and then if I still think it's bad, then it's bad. But I do set reviews, and sometimes cards are bad and sometimes they're good. But even in set reviews where it doesn't, like, whether I give a card a 3 or a 4 in limited, like, no one cares about that. But I'm looking at, like, why is this card interesting? What is good about it, as opposed to what is bad about it? Just because I feel like you get more value long term by looking for upsides in things instead of downsides. But I mean, like, on my stream, I've been critical of things that I think are worth criticizing.
But that's the difference, right? Like, you can be constructive. Like, we've said this set isn't very fun to draft, or I don't understand this card, or I don't know why these things were designed this way, and we've levied constructive criticism. And the truth is that people at Wizards of the Coast have no problem with that whatsoever. In fact, they welcome it usually, right? It's when you spout off and you're just being super negative and this sucks and that sucks and having no opinion,
There are ways to get the benefit of what people imagine the negative parts are without being negative. Like, you can see that you could be a vehicle to change the things you want to change while bypassing the really negative part. That being said, we're both human beings. We do have a bunch of incentives lined up. I would imagine that affects our behavior somewhat.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, if we're speaking, like, we speak in a variety of different roles, and I'm more likely to say, express frustration when I'm on my stream than when I'm, say, doing coverage, just because that would just be inappropriate. So
totally,
I think that,
and that's just being a professional. I mean,
yeah, depending on where we're standing and what we're saying, it's just going to be different. So I think we both try to not conceal what we're thinking, and we both try to operate with integrity, but we're also both professionals, and there are some boundaries that, depending on the situation, it's just not, like, it would not be a good idea to cross. So
totally. Yeah. And I think that, like, again, I wanted to answer this question because it's a weird question for us to field, right? Like, it doesn't have anything to do with limited.
It goes at the heart of, like, are you guys saying the things you believe? And I think we are.
I think we are too. But, and that's why I wanted to do it, because I figure Neil's probably not the only one who's wondered about that. So
could we be investigative journalists and, pull no punches, no holds barred? Like, yeah, we could probably go harder on that if we wanted to, but it's also like
upside downside, right? Yeah.
Right. I mean, and even for the people who think that would be upside, I honestly think we accomplish more good by not trying to, like, shine a spotlight on every single thing we think is wrong. I point out the things I think are important that I disagree with, but
yeah. No, it's good. You're okay.
It's an interesting question.
I like that question. Yeah, I think, and I think it's one worth. I mean, normally I would just be like, let's talk about something limited, but I thought this would be worth addressing. Kind of interesting little take. And by the way, you will see different approaches from different people in the Magic community across the board. You will see the extremes represented. You'll see people in the middle, and this is just the approach that Luis and I have found that works best for us. Tyler Barnett has given me a pack of Oath of the Gatewatch for a crack-a-pack, so let's. Oh, this one smells really good. Maybe it has something sweet in it just because it smells so good. Is that how that works? Dazzling Reflection is our first card, so no.
Nope.
Umara Entangler.
This card, there were some sets where I would love this card, and it would be a card I would put in many of my decks. I do not tend to play it in this format.
No, me neither. It's like your backup 2-drop when you just got to have a 2. Brute Strength. That's the +3/+1 and trample for 1 in a red.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this card either.
I kind of like it, but we're not taking it here.
I think it's okay in red-green. I think it's pretty medium in most of the other colors.
Yeah. Lone Larva.
I actually dislike Lone Larva to a great degree.
Oh, no.
I just haven't been... I think there are some decks where you should play it, but there are a lot of decks where I just do not like the card.
Yeah, it's not a very good card, though I have played it a fair bit on it. If I'm splashing, I'm more likely to play it. Especially if I'm playing the, it sounds weird to say, but a green-based control deck or a deck that's looking to ramp up and go long. Card's okay for that. Witness the End. I kind of like me some Witness the End. This is not the type of card I normally play. It's a decent card
for like control matchups.
Yeah.
I don't generally. I mean, sometimes I'll play one in my main deck, but usually it's much more likely for it to be just in my sideboard.
Yeah, and bring it in when it seems like it would be good. The thing I like about these type of cards against decks that are trying to ramp out or have a big top end is that whether they exile lands or creatures or whatever, you're kind of happy no matter what. If they're sitting there looking at their hand and they're staring at a 7-drop or something, if they exile 2 lands, which is kind of the default, bad case scenario for cards like this, then you're pretty happy. Netcaster Spider. We have a winner.
It's a fine card. It's probably our front runner right now.
Yeah. Oh, it's way out there. Warden of Geometries. What went wrong with Warden of Geometries?
The stats just aren't good enough. If it was a 2/4, the card would be pretty different.
Yeah.
But it's just a 2/3 for 4 mana, and it's just not a great deal. So
yeah,
I'm still taking Netcaster here, but I really don't want to first pick Netcaster for Spider. It's like the 3rd best green common or something.
Yeah. Well, I've got an upgrade for you.
Dude.
Stalking Drone.
All right, that is either the 1st or 2nd best green common, depending on which philosophy you subscribe to. And right now, it's certainly the winner. Stalking Drone's very good.
Yeah, easy winner there. We've got an Expedition Raptor here.
I don't mind it, but I would certainly take the Stalking Drone over it.
I like it more than Andrew Cuneo, but I don't like Stalking Drone as much as Andrew Cuneo, but I'm still taking Stalking Drone over Expedition Raptor. Reality Hemorrhage. There's some business.
Yeah.
How do you match up Reality Hemorrhage to Drone?
Is a reasonable amount better.
I do too. I actually do too. Yeah, there was a lot of Reality Hemorrhages flying around the last draft I did.
It turns out 2-mana Shock is just not a great card. It's a fine card. You're always going to play it, but it's not a card I'm really excited about.
No, it's again, it kind of speaks to the impact, right? It's just not a high impact card, generally speaking. Again, you're not cutting it. Walker of the Wastes. This poor guy never really came together. That's the 4 and a colorless for a 4/4 with trample, and it gets +1/+1 for each land you control named Wastes.
Oh, the 10/10 trample for 5?
Yeah.
But
maybe before the set came out.
I've always wanted to play this card, but it's never gotten there for me. Part of it is that wastes are so bad. You just don't want to waste in your deck.
No, they're terrible. I lost to that card today, Luis.
Well, I mean, it's a card you can lose to. It's not like an unreal bad card. It
just wasn't the only one. There was an Untamed Hunger.
Ooh.
Yeah, Graham from Loading Ready Run destroyed me with a Walker of the Wastes. And separately from that, also a Untamed Hunger.
All right, I owe Graham a high five then.
I am still recovering. It was on stream, by the way. Immolating Glare. There's some business.
Immolating Glare is good. The funny thing is, I think I might still take Stalking Drone over it.
It's close, right?
Yeah, just the fact that Immolating Glare is a pretty defensive card. I mean, look, you'll play it in your aggro decks because it's so cheap, but Stalking Drone is just a very good card. Though white is enough better than green, I think I'd probably just take Glare. Yeah, I would take Glare.
I'm on Glare currently myself. Storm Chaser Mage is not enough to take me off of, either Glare or Stalking Drone. I would take those.
No, I mean, I think Storm Chaser Mage is better than either of those cards, but it's a 2-color card, and I'm just not going to first pick. I'm not going to first pick a 2-color card that's like, one a 1 or 2 points above these cards. Like a Cliffhaven Vampire is a different story because that's a solid 8 out of 10. But Storm Chaser is like a 6 out of 10, and Stalking Drone and Glare are like a 5 out of 10 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also interesting to note that Storm Chaser Mage is a 2-mana spell, right? So it wants you to have both of those colors and it wants to come down on turn 2 for maximum effectiveness, it does, lose out significantly as the game goes on. And when you look at a card like Cliffhaven Vampire, that's not necessarily true. That card can be quite good later in the game and still serve a really good purpose. So it kind of goes against you in 2 ways. A rare. We have Bearer of Silence. Rawr.
All right. I would probably just take Bearer of Silence.
You like it?
It's a fine card. It's not insane. The fact that it can't block means that there are definitely decks that play this card, but it's not an all-star. But I think in general it's a good enough card. It is a 2-for-1 to some degree. You can also cast it on turn 2, and it's pretty good.
Yep.
I think Bearer of Silence is my pick, yeah.
Yeah, I would take Bearer of Silence here too. I've played with it a fair bit, and when you do get to nab something with it, it feels great. I mean, that is like something real, not a token or whatever. So sure, I think for me it's between Bearer of Silence and Immolating Glare. I'd probably kind of go back and forth on those, and ultimately I'd settle on the Bearer. It just has higher upside.
Yeah, it should have been a 2/2, so it could be a Bearer of Silence.
Totally should have, and it shouldn't have flying either. Okay, so that's out of the way. Questions down, crack a pack down, and we are going to get right into our main topic because I want to make sure that we cover everything we want to cover. And Luis and I both have to get packed up and hit the hay to get on an airplane tomorrow / go to work tomorrow. So
why
we're going to do what's that?
So why not both?
Yeah, both for you. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a step-by-step guide of how to approach a draft. Now, I know that sounds big, right? Like that's like, whoa, like, isn't that what every show's about kind of? And it's like, yeah, it is. But we're going to really deconstruct things and think about the step-by-step nature of it. So before the draft starts, as it's began, you're going through pack 1, pack 2, pack 3, you're doing your deck build. And there should be things in your head to help guide you, right? And it occurred to Luis actually, who had the idea for the topic that, this isn't something, there's going to be things that are important that you should be thinking about at different stages of the draft and that you should be changing as you work your way through that people aren't, right? Maybe they have a couple of these concepts down, but then there's other ones that they don't yet. So we thought it'd be sweet to go through step by step through the whole draft, portion and then onto the deck building and actually tell you what it is that you should be thinking about and prioritizing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And some of this stuff we'll have talked about before. In fact, a lot of it, but I wanted to kind of, like you said, put it all in one place and have it be, like I said, a step-by-step guide, just because getting like kind of circling everything up and putting it together, there was some new stuff too, but like in general, like if you've listened to a lot of the shows that I've been on, a lot of these things are things I tend to say, but I think that there's value in reiterating a lot, good points.
Oh, and repackaging it as one whole thing too. That's really important. One of the things that you'll find, when you're learning a new game, especially a deep game like Magic, Poker, something like that, is that there will be concepts that you need to understand, and they're individual kind of siloed concepts. But of course, they all work together after you've got them all down, and you will see people misapply concepts. And that's really funny because that's actually usually worse than if you just had not applied a concept at all and just kind of been on autopilot. So this will help sort of stitch it all together. So why don't we start off with before the draft, the pre-draft, and talk about what our goals are.
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay, so the first one would be to identify what's open, right?
So, the funny thing is, it took me a surprisingly long time to realize that this is actually what the whole game of draft is.
Yes.
I mean, nominally when you draft, you're trying to draft a good deck. Yes, that's clearly like and that's the end result. That's not how you get there is the important part. And the number one most important way to get there is to identify what's open, because opening opening a good rare, yeah, that's awesome, but you're not going to open good rares most of the time unless you're drafting Fate Reforged, where half the rares are great. And if every rare is great, no rare is great, right? But identifying what is open and what you should be drafting in every particular draft. I mean, that's first of all, that's the puzzle of the draft. That's why it's fun. Just decoding the signals to figure out where you're supposed to be is awesome. And you'll win a lot more if you realize that this is what you're here to do.
That's right.
You're here to figure out what colors are open, what, guild, shard, clan is open. And the reason I say those things is because not every format's the same. Most formats, it's finding the two open colors. We're in a format like that right now. Oath of the Gatewatch Battle for Zendikar is a format where your main goal is to find the two colors that are the most open. And sometimes more than two are open, but in general, sometimes less than two are open. But in general, you're trying to find the two open colors. If you're drafting triple cons, you're trying to figure out which clan you're supposed to be in RTR, you're trying to find two open colors, but only in five certain combinations, because the 5 supported guilds were the colors you wanted. Drafting black white in Return to Ravnica is just not a good idea, because that was not one of the supported guilds.
And so you're saying that, before you sit down for the draft, you should have a concept for that, or as you're sitting down to open up your first pack. Well,
especially for drafting cons. But
yeah, but I mean, seriously, right? Like, that's a big deal to have an idea. And that's part of the functionality of this podcast, right? Is to keep you up to date on what this set wants from you. What is this set asking that you do? And that, because it changes from set to set. So you need to have that in your head about, like, well, what am I really trying to do? How many colors am I supposed to be? Is this a highly synergistic format? Is it more of a cab style format? And you should have at least those things loosely in your head about, like, where do I need to go from here? And that just sets the stage for you, right? Because if you don't know that and you open up, Cons of Tarkir booster packs thinking, well, I'm going to draft this sweet 2-color deck, you're just going to get smashed, right? And it's going to be really tough to know exactly what's going on. If you tried to do that with Battle for Zendikar, you don't know what the synergies are. You don't know what the decks, the colors, the pairs, the things that work well together. And you're just going to draft a couple of colors and hope that it comes together, but you won't have any clue. So getting that set in your head is going to be, really set the stage.
We have to point out that early in the format, you won't necessarily know these things. I mean, no one will.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm not saying that, we're not sitting here saying, like, before you do your first draft of a new format, you have to know everything about it. This is more like, in general, this is how you should approach draft, especially since most formats you're going to have an idea of these things. These are things you can figure out.
Yes.
There are things you can find out through research or doing other drafts or what have you. So to put this as an example for the format we're in right now, Oath of the Gatewatch, it's a 2-color format. I mean, you can splash a 3rd color, but your goal is going to be to find the 2 open colors. And all the color pairs are draftable. I would say that blue, white, and black, red are enough behind the curve that I had to deprioritize cards that go into those decks. But in general, you can pair any 2 colors and you're going to be in at least decent shape.
Yep.
So if you identify that, red and green are both very open, then you can draft red and green and you'll end up with a red-green deck that's presumably good. So knowing those things is basically step 0. Just what are you looking for in this format, and what are your goals? And identifying what's open is the idea here, and and each format has different things you're looking for. The next step would be, know your color preferences, and this is one I actually want to warn about more than recommend, because I think most people get this wrong, where their color preferences are too strong. We're both guilty of this. I mean, we can't say that we're not.
No, if there's a blue-black deck, I'm in. Yeah.
Yeah, like I drafted blue-black and Dragons of Tarkir like every time.
Yeah.
And there I was clearly, going too far, and I was forcing it. So that's you shouldn't do that. But knowing stuff like, again, going back to this format, blue-white's pretty bad. Reflector Mage is rated worse than it should be. Like, if you look at Reflector Mage as just a straight-up card in Limited without worrying about the context, it's a very good card.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a fantastic card. But Reflector Mage is, I took it over Core Sky Climber in the Pro Tour, because, granted, I already had 2 cards at that point, but still, like, I could have used, it was the better card, but I just knew I wasn't going to be blue-white, because it's just so infrequently that you end up blue-white. So know your color preferences and use this as more a tiebreaker. By the way, I have to warn you, I'm going to use the word tiebreaker a lot. And what I mean by it, obviously people know what tiebreaker means exactly, but what I mean is, if something's a tiebreaker, it shouldn't make it so you take a 6 over a 9, but it does mean that if you're debating between like a 7 and a 7.5, a tiebreaker can swing that.
Yep.
So I'm not taking, I wouldn't take like a really like a very bad card over a Reflector Mage, but I would take a card I describe as a 5 over Reflector Mage at like 7 or 7.5. So you kind of have to know, where that flips. But in general, when I say something's a tiebreaker, it means it helps you decide between 2 fairly close things, which, again, that's what the word means, but we're just going to use it a lot. So I wanted to make sure we understood where we're at.
And it's smart too, because it comes up a lot.
Yeah.
It just does. Like when you're doing a draft, you have to remember that you're dealing like a lot of people like to try to think in terms of black and white, where like this is the correct pick and this is the incorrect pick. And while that is technically true, you can't actually know which one was correct and which one was not. So it's better to think in terms of gradients, right? Thinking of terms of like, these are within 20% of each other is how good they are for my deck. And I don't really know which direction it should swing here. So what are the other factors that might dictate that I take card A over card B? And it could be any number of things that we'll be covering in here. And that's a tiebreaker scenario where you're like, look, either of these could go in my deck. I don't know which one I'm supposed to take. Now you start looking at external factors. So that's kind of where Luis is going with that.
So the next step is going to sound strange, but it's know the good cards. And
yeah,
it's actually not that difficult to have a rough idea of where each card falls into. And knowing cards pick one, pack one is really important. To kind of put it in perspective how important it is, we dedicate a good part of our limited testing before the Pro Tour to actually making lists of every rare that's better than the best uncommon, and every uncommon and rare that's then better than the best common, and which order the commons are in. And we here on the show are quick to point out that once you've taken a couple cards, lists like these don't help that much because it's all contextual. And that is true.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say otherwise. But knowing pick one, pack one, that's actually not that contextual, because you can actually make an order of cards that are pick one, pack one. Like, Oblivion Strike and Isolation Zone are better than all the other commons. That's just a fact. I think that it's well accepted at this point. So yes. Identifying that like Nissa's Judgment and Relief Captain are like Devour and Flames are the best uncommons is crucial. This happens to be a set where the best uncommons are actually very close to the best commons, but if you go back to something like Fate Reforged and you had a Dragon Scale Elite or whatever it's called, because you always correct me on this one.
Elite Scale Guard.
Yes. That was just the best uncommon by a lot. And that and Pyrotechnics and the Temur Sabertooth were just so good that they crushed all the commons by a lot.
Yeah.
And you need to know
But you needed to know that, right? Yeah. I mean, that was valuable information to have.
It sounds like it's a lot of information to carry in your head of how good every single card is on a list, but you don't actually have to know the exact placement of these cards. You just need to know them by group, like know which rares are better than the best uncommon, because you don't have to compare the rares to each other. Yes, sometimes you can open foils, but we basically just ignore that because it's not super relevant. And then knowing where all the uncommons stand in relation to the commons and whatnot. An example is Frank Karsten wrote an article that we're going to link to, is with his pick order list for every single card in Oath of the Gatewatch. And we aren't saying that we agree with Frank's list, because I think we would both, find some differences there. Mm-hmm. But the example is really good. This is what a list looks like of a person who knows what they're talking about. Frank is very good. So figuring out, your own personal list is important, but at the very least, look at Frank's list and see why he did that sort of thing. I always like looking at his list after the Pro Tour and trying to figure out like, oh, why did he think this was here? And why did he think this was there?
Yeah.
But he did go through the work of ranking every single card. And that's something that if you want to be fully prepared for a draft, you can do, or find someone else's list and make the adjustments that you think are right to it or whatever. But have an idea of which cards are good, so that pick one, pack one, that you're not, you're not taking a card that you're not making a pick where you're passing a really good card that you just aren't aware is good.
Right. And that is a big deal. It really is. Like you said, you did, throw the caveat out there that it does deteriorate as your deck starts to have different needs and wants, but having that base level of knowledge is pretty handy. It's just, it's very good pack one, pick one, and it's still handy later on too, just so you don't get lost down the line.
Yeah. So those are the things that you want to do before the draft. And, know kind of what the set looks like and what you're looking for in terms of identifying, again, clan, guild, color combination, what have you. Mm-hmm. And know kind of, have an idea of color preferences. This was the least important part. So if you don't actually have an idea of your color preferences, that's fine. You can have 0 color preferences in a format. That's acceptable. And then have an idea of what are good cards and what aren't, so that like kind of like when we do a Crack-a-Pack and we kind of instantly dismiss a lot of the cards. Like, we don't in the beginning of the format, we talk about every card, but like the one today, we kind of sped through a lot of the cards because I believe a lot of the listeners who've done drafts in this format know that you don't have to worry about first picking a Dazzling Reflection. That's just never going to happen.
Right.
So you actually get to save mental space too once you kind of know what is just not eligible to be first picked.
Yeah.
So let's move into the draft.
Yeah, so this is where you get to open up your first pack and you're staring down at pick number 1, which is, I know for a lot of people, this is kind of the scary part of a draft, because once you get some colors and some flow going, you know, your choices start to get narrowed down. But when you're looking down at those 14 cards and they're staring back at you, this is the part that people can get a little overwhelmed with if they don't draft that often. So this is, you know, you and I kind of have a pretty strong party line on this one because we're in agreement on it, which is pick the best card.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more here than people think, because a lot of people tend to overthink it. They look at a pack that has, you know, multiple good black cards and then like an okay red card, and they're like, I'm gonna take the red card, I'm gonna get really clever, and I'm not gonna take the black card.
Oh yeah, people love doing that.
Do not do this. Just take the best card.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is definitely one of those tiebreaker situations where, you know, if you look at like Oblivion Strike and Isolation Zone, and then there's also, let's say, Grasp of Darkness, Essence Depleter in the pack, and no other white cards. Yes, there you might want to take Isolation Zone because I believe it's close enough to Oblivion Strike. The Strike is better. But I wouldn't fault you for doing that. But on the other hand, if it's like Oblivion Zone, or sorry, Isolation Zone and Chandra, and there's all red cards, like just take the Chandra. It doesn't matter. Like you can't do that. No,
but people do that. And, you know, the thinking is, it's funny because this is where people get into trouble, right? Is that, remember when I was talking about concepts earlier and how you sort of have these siloed off concepts and then you start trying to apply them and you realize that you can run into some trouble? This is exactly that. This is a perfect example of that, which is that one of the concepts that people learn after they've been drafting for a while, listening to podcasts like this, reading articles and such, is the idea that the cards you pass to your left are going to affect the cards that get passed to you in pack 2, because the people downstream, you're like, oh, those are people down there that are actually thinking and taking cards, and they're going to take a black card. And then the next person is going to take a black card because this pack is so stacked up on black cards, you know, like in the example that you gave. And then the next person might even take a black card. So now I've got the next, you know, 2 to 3 people to my left-hand side drafting black. So the thinking is, well, I'm just going to stay out of that scrum because in pack 2, they're all going to be taking the black cards and I don't want to be in that color. That has some logic to it. It makes sense, right? There is something behind that where you want to try to set yourself up as best as possibly can for the second pack. But the truth of the matter is that it doesn't actually end up panning out that way when you just give away straight up value out of the pack that you open. And you know, I don't mean monetary value. I mean, you know, how big of an impact on my win percentage is this card, or can this card be? And if you start taking that off of your own plate, you're just shooting yourself in the foot immediately for a hypothetical situation that might arise and might not. There's a lot of things that can go different than you will not expect. You'll think, well, the next 3 people are in black. And then if you ever actually looked at what happens, it often isn't the case that happens. The cards go a lot later than you want, or if you're ever at a draft and you hear somebody say,
predict these things.
Yeah,
I mean, you can make educated guesses, but you know, going back to the example where we opened Strike, Grasp, Essence Depleter, Isolation Zone, it could be very easy that the person to your left took like a gold card and maybe now just takes a green card because they took a white green card first pick, or they took a card that in a color that doesn't pair very well with black, and they're just like, well, I don't want to take a black card. I'll do War Cleric out of this pack because it goes much better with my red card.
Exactly. This stuff happens all the time. And then the key mathematical thing that you have to realize too is that, so you're willingly taking a worse card for your deck, and remember that second pack is the only one that comes from that side. Right? You're only setting yourself up for one of the 3 packs. Now that's a significant percentage, but it's not worth taking worse cards over. That's the end story. Because no matter what, you're going to get cards coming from that left-hand side. They may not be in your primary color, but you also have another color, and they could easily be in that.
Yeah. And so in pick 1, the main thing you should do is just take the best card. Yep. Like if you just default to that, you're not going to get in trouble.
Right.
So that's pick 1. That's actually one of the easier picks of the draft, but you've done it. Congratulations.
Yep.
Pick 2. Well, you also probably should take the best card here.
Agree.
You have a little bit more information, and again, you're able to use that as a tiebreaker. Where if you took a black card first pick, and then you're deciding between strike and isolations. And I'm going to use these examples a lot because they're just really good go-to examples. You should just take Oblivion Strike. Or ultimately, even better one. You took a white card first pick. Second pick, do you take Oblivion Strike or Isolation Zone? Right. I would take Isolation Zone.
Take the zone.
It's slightly worse than Strike, but it's the same color, so that's fine. But if you took Isolation Zone first pick, you should not take Ondu War Cleric over Oblivion Strike. There's just too big of a power level disparity there. Still, you should still default to taking the best card, unless the second best card is very close to the best card in your colors, or in a color combination that goes with your first color. Like if you're going back to something like Khans, you want something that's at least can overlap in the same clan. In Return to Ravnica, or any set that's set up with like really strict guilds, there it's very different, because there if you first picked like a blue card, then you just couldn't second pick a green card and know that you'd play both, which means that you had to think more about what's going on there.
Which again goes back to you sitting down at the draft and having a base level understanding of that.
Yeah, just know that you know that in a format like Return to Ravnica, you can't first pick blue card, second pick green card, and have two cards. You have two individual cards, but you don't have a pair there. Right. Those two cards aren't going to see play in the same deck. So
yeah, and even in a more normal set like the one we're in now, right, in Oath of the Gatewatch, you still want to take the more powerful card, because the thing that you have to remember, and we preach this on the show constantly, is to stay open, right? Is that you are in that early stages, you are figuring out what's open. You put it as your number one, what are your goals on the pre-draft section? Identify what's open, right? You are sitting down, making these picks to do that. And I know it's tempting to first pick an Isolation Zone and be like, well, I'm white. That's it. And you know what? You're not. You're really not yet. You need to know more information about the cards that are being passed to you before you know what colors you're in. And while if you do get good white cards or reasonable white cards, sure, there is some benefit to sticking to white and taking those cards. If you past like what you said there, where there's a good white card but a really great black card or any other color, if you start passing those, you are doing yourself a disservice, because there's every chance that the color that you picked is not open. You do not have control over that, and you will not know it until you get further into this pack. So it's much better to cast a wider net early and then start to zone in after that, being willing to abandon your early picks.
Definitely. And as we're going to go into a little later, being open is definitely a strength, and it's something that you just should be doing in general, because again, the game here is not to first pick the best card, second pick the best card, and then just play those two colors. The game here is to determine what you should be drafting and what is open. And the way you do that is by not committing, because you just should not be committing this early. So pick one, you took the best card. Pick two, you took probably the best card. Again, we're going to say you took the best card because sometimes the only times you take the second best are when it's really close.
Yep.
Picks 3 through 6, here's where you start paying attention more and more. And again, the reason why draft is so difficult and why we can do 350 episodes about limited so far, with at least another 20 or 30 before we end our run here.
Whoa buddy, easy.
Draft is hard, and every pick you take changes a bunch of different little knobs where you're deciding like, okay, now can I commit? Or, okay, I'm really not getting a sense this is open. Or, I think this other color is open, I should switch. So for picks 3 through 6, again, you lean towards picking the best card, but now you start to really pay attention to what you already have. So let's go back to our previous couple picks. You have Isolation Zone and Oblivion Strike. There's a great black card, a great white card. Pick 3, you look at Vampire Envoy and Boulder Salvo. I would take Vampire Envoy there. I think it's close because Salvo is a better card, but given they already have a black card and a white card, I'm still happy taking a card which is quite good. I mean, Envoy is not a bad card.
Yep.
So it goes really well with our first two picks. Seeing it and Salvo third pick is not a huge signal either way. Like either way, it's a positive sign because they're both premium cards. I wouldn't take a Core Scythe Master over Boulder Salvo though, because I think that the power level disparity is too much there.
Yep.
So you really there's no like bright line here, unfortunately.
Fortunately, this is what makes it interesting.
Yeah, where you're like, okay, well, I will take this card to stay in my colors, or I'll take this card because it's the best card. At some point, you do have to make a choice, but you're really just trying to suck up as much information as you can here. And this is really where if you see something like, a fifth pick Blinding Drone. Let's say you have these like two black cards, a white card, and then third pick or fourth pick you take let's say another black card. If I see a Blinding Drone 5th pick, there's a pretty good chance that I'm just going to take it. Because a 5th pick Blinding Drone is definitely a signal. And let's say I have a white card and 3 black cards, and I first pick that white card. It's not really a huge signal that white's open. So
totally,
you're constantly evaluating what you already have, why you have it, and then what you can expect to see in the future, and why you're seeing those cards. So when you see a Blinding Drone 5th, you have to know, like, okay, there probably aren't 2 blue drafters within like 3 or 4 seats of me, and there might be 0.
Right, or at least colorless blue drafters, yeah.
Right. And that's a critical point, because that leads you to like, maybe I should be taking these cards.
Yeah.
So pick 7 through 10, in an ideal world, you're kind of just solidifying what you already have. Most drafts, I would say, you've got a good handle on what you're going to be drafting by now. Not every draft, certainly. There's a lot of drafts that you don't. But a lot of drafts, this is where you have, you start taking your like C-level black and white cards in this, hypothetical example where we're black-white.
Yep.
And it was going to take something pretty strong to move us out of it, because both colors seem to be open-ish. The thing is, determining what's open also has to do with the medium cards too. The core Scythe Masters or Slaughter Drones that no one's like really going out of their way to take. But the fact that they're still in the pack on pick 8 or 9, that's relevant information.
Sure.
And pick 7 through 10 also is where you can see a really, really open color. This is sometimes, I'm sure we both have. We've seen a Boulder Salvo come 8th pick. Yes. At that point, that's like, that a light bulb should go on at that point, and you should, again, think like, okay, this is really open. Now I've got an opportunity. So here's where it also helps if you've biased your previous picks. Like, and one of the ways to do that is, let's say you have 6 white cards and 2 black cards, and you see a black card and a white card. Lean towards taking the white card, because if you can end up at the end of a pack with like 7 playable white cards and 2 playable black cards, you have a lot more freedom than if you have 5 and 5 or 5 and 4.
Yeah, and that's another tiebreaker scenario that pops up all the time. You also do get a marginal benefit from cutting a card. Cutting a card is not the term. I don't mean cutting it in the sense of I'm not going to play this and I don't want you to either. I mean in cutting a color, right? Where you're like, you're leaning towards taking a bunch of, let's say, the white cards out of the pack. You have to remember that the people to your left are then not getting any playable white cards if you're hedging over towards that direction. Now, again, these concepts are very tricky, because you don't want to take that too far. You still want to take the best card. And if it's not a tiebreaker scenario, you don't want to say, well, I'm just going to push into white here and pass good cards that would go in my deck and are in my colors, but I really just want to cut white. You do want to be careful about that. But again, these tiebreakers matter. They really do. That core Sky Climber that you're getting 7th or 8th pick or whatever, you take that over, like you said, like a Slaughter Drone or something like that, if you're looking to cut white, and you're just making it so the people to your left are going to have a hard time being in white. And you do get some benefit from that. You do. Yeah,
definitely. Because again, look what I just said. Seeing those late medium cards helps you determine what colors are open. Mm-hmm. And if the person to your left, let's say they took like a General Tazri, a pretty good white mythic rare there, and they don't take a ton of white because you took the premium white cards, but then you pass them like, a core Sky Climber on an Appa Patrol or the 1/4 Defender.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Protector. And then all of a sudden, they have 3 or 4 white cards at the end of the pack. That's very different than having 1 to 2 white cards, even if those last 2 white cards aren't very good ones.
Yes.
So I think when people look at it, they look at the total number they have, and that is how they evaluate it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now we're kind of hitting the final stretch on pack 1 here.
Yeah, you're in picks 11 through 14 or 15 if it's one of those sets that has an extra card. You take pretty much any playable card you see if you're in any way undecided. But if you're actually set in your colors, which you can be at this point, there is value into passing playables. Like, let's say you're strongly blue-red. You can just pass a green card because you want to put the person to your left into green, and who knows, maybe that was the tiebreaker. Maybe the person to your left was like, heavy black with 2 green cards and a blue card, then you pass them another green card, and they're like, all right, maybe green is a little bit more open. Mm-hmm. So if you know you're not going to play it, or you're very sure you're not going to play it, it's fine to pass late pick playables here. If you're undecided, if you're like, split between 3 different colors, just be safe and take a playable at this case.
Yeah. Now I had one other point here about this last stretch. It starts with the picks, 7 through 10, and it really starts with pick 9, right? Which is you get to start seeing which cards have wheeled, which cards you opened, have seen in a pack, have gone through the entire table and have come back. And this is valuable information as well. This will help dictate what the texture of the draft table looks like as far as colors go, because, you know, you're going to get a feel the more you draft for how good the cards are and which ones, you know, I'm putting this in air quotes, but should wheel or not. You know, this card just shouldn't have been able to go through the entire rest of the table without something special happening. Another one that you'll see are gold cards, right? Sometimes you get a pass a gold card second pick and you don't take it because maybe you're still kind of flirting with which colors you're actually going to be in. And maybe that is one of them, and that comes back. You know, that's usually a pretty good indicator that specific color pair is probably open at the table, and it might be good for you to move in on it. It's just another data point, but seeing what cards have come back on the wheels, you know, that's important information, even if it's not necessarily going to affect the bottom line of your deck super, super strongly.
Yeah, and you can do something like this pack had 4 red cards and none of them wheeled.
Yes. Yeah.
So one thing, depending on how spiky you want to be, and I know we've got you know, the Nuts and Bolts Spikes podcast here.
Yep.
If you're drafting on Magic Online, you can take, you know, use the snipping tool and take a picture of your first couple packs so you can compare them to see what's not there when they wheel.
Or if you can just remember them all.
Yeah, I tend to remember the things that are important about them, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's just like part of the advantage of drafting on Magic Online is you can do that. You can have Frank's pick order list and look at it during the draft. Like, these are things that are available to everyone. It's definitely not unfair to use them. It will mean that when you do a live draft, you're not going to have these tools, so don't get like too cozy with them. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with using these to try to kind of hone your memory or figure out what you're looking for.
I agree. All right, so you've now exited pack number 1. What happens now?
So after pack 1, you can take stock.
This is big, by the way.
Live, you're going to have, you know, 30 seconds to a minute. On Magic Online, you can kind of just do this the whole time, so you don't really have like an actual break in between the packs. But figure out how pack 1 went. Do a postmortem. Look at how many cards of each color do you have? How many good cards of each color you have? Like your actual good cards, right? Like it's important to note that you have 7 white cards, but it's also important to note if only one of them is good and like 6 of them are like pick 5 through 7 value cards, that's not that exciting. On the other hand, if you have 4 premium white cards and 3 decent ones, like, okay, you're in white, white is open.
Yes.
Figure out when you got them. Like, I still remember, you know, when Ben S was looking at one of my decks, and he was like, you know, you only have like 2 good blue cards, and these are the cards you opened and you got second pick. Like, blue just wasn't open, even though you've got a lot of blue cards. That's a very critical piece of information.
Oh, that's huge. And this is where you're going to find out
if you first picked if you first picked a good white card and second picked a good white card, but then the rest of the pack had only medium to bad white cards, or you took a bunch of red cards, just the wheels should be turning. Like, it's possible to second pick a white card and have white not be open. The person to your right could have opened a better white card, or opened, you know, a Devour in Flames, but then just gone white.
Yep.
So the information you get is mostly concentrated in the like 4th through 7th picks in terms of what's open.
Yes.
So
I think that's a huge one. Also, I mean, how many times have I found myself, especially when I was learning how to draft, first picking, let's just say an isolation zone here, picking up a couple of the cards like you mentioned, you know, you get a couple of decent white cards and then a whole bunch of cards and, you know, like let's say a bunch of black cards and then some green cards or whatever. And I'll look after the first pack and go, okay, I have an isolation zone. That's great. But my green cards are actually better than my white cards. I have 4 green cards. They're all pretty good. They're all, you know, stocking drone level cards or whatever. And I've got, you know, a really good white card and a couple of medium white cards. And it's just like, I just shouldn't be in white. Not only was it not open, I've actually already started to draft another color that looks pretty reasonable here. But in my head, I got married to that first pick, right? You think about it in terms of like, I really want to play this isolation zone. It's the best card in my deck, right? And it easily could be the best card in your deck coming out of pack 1. But you need, like, what I like to do is sort of reset, right? Imagine a friend had come up to me and said, these are the cards I opened or that I've taken out of my first pack. What am I doing from here? Where that way, because I think that it sort of snowballs in your head where you go down this like rabbit hole of like, okay, I first picked isolation zone. I'm white. I took an undo cleric. I'm still white. And then white just didn't end up coming together for you. And you're actually in a different deck that you knew or that you didn't really realize. This is the time to find that out, because now you can course correct still early enough in the draft to have a meaningful effect. But if you wait till after pack 2 to realize this, you could have passed up on a lot of stuff.
Definitely. And, you know, it's important to figure out kind of again, what happened in pack one? Why do you have the cards you do? And you're going to end up in a couple different places. I mean, obviously, again, drafts are a pretty wide range of results. This isn't going to encompass everything, but I think that these couple possibilities are going to be where most drafts are going to end up. In terms of good places to end up, one is that you're solidly in two colors. You have good cards of each one. You did it.
Yay.
This is what you're trying to do. Yep. You first picked a blue card. You second picked a green card. You got past blue and green cards. You have five of each, and you're pretty sure both are open. You're going to continue taking blue and green cards. Let's see how good your deck ends up.
Yep.
This is pretty easy. At this point, you're probably not going to have that difficult of a draft. You're just going to kind of draft the cards that your deck wants.
Yep.
Another good place to end up, and this is the most fun place to end up, if we're being honest.
We need a name for this, by the way. This is where I want to be. This is where I want my ashes to be spread. This is where I.
This is when you're super deep in one color, and you just don't. You've never had to commit to a second color. So the reason there's two reasons this is great. One, you've identified a color that's open. There's really no way to do this unless you've actually identified an open color. So you have after pack one, 6 or 7 playable red cards, let's say. And yeah, you probably have another couple cards of other colors. You've got 1 to 2 cards of maybe 2 other colors, something like that.
Yeah. But
red is open. And the great part about this is if you open a bomb rare, you can take it no matter what. I mean, yes, some formats some color combinations aren't draftable. So if red-white's not draftable and you open a white bomb rare, that's a different thing. But let's look at the format we're in where basically any 2 color combination is draftable. If you're mono red after pack 1 or only committed to red after pack 1, you can open a lot of just really, really good rares of any single color and just be like, yep, this is what I'm taking.
Yeah, you could open up a Linvala. You don't have another reasonable white card in your pile, and you just slam it.
Yeah, and it's very, very powerful to be in this spot because you have a lot of good options. And you still should have information if you're paying attention, which you are because this is how you draft, of what colors you passed. Mm-hmm. So let's say as you're taking all these great red cards, red is just wide open. You notice that you're passing some good black cards, but you don't notice very many white cards. And again, it's not quite as clear as when you take the cards and can look at the pack afterwards, but you should still get a sense of these things. You should still remember that you passed 2 Vampire Envoys or you saw 0 premium white cards.
Right.
And so you have information about what you might see in packs 2 and pack 3, but you still know that you can go in a lot of different directions.
Yep.
So this is an awesome place to be. It's very fun. This is the place where, when you're in the first example, you're in blue-green and they're both open. They're opening pack 2 is a sweat because if you want to open a great blue or green card. If you're in this other place, the place that is yet unnamed, where you've gone super deep in one color, opening pack 2 is just a delight because you just know if you open something good, you get to take it. Mm-hmm. Another place that's decent to be. This is we're kind of going down the scale. You're in 2 colors that are open, but you're a little light on both, and that's because you read the draft, and this is where you ended up. You first picked. You first picked a blue card, you second picked a green card, but then you took 2 black cards, then 3 white cards, then another black card, and it actually turns out black and white are open. Yep. You switched into them, but you're slightly lower on playables because you spent your first 2 to 3 picks, maybe even 4 picks on other colors. And don't be frustrated that you're in this spot. This is actually a sign of good drafting.
Exactly.
It's hard to end up here unless you actually are reading cues and jumping into colors that are open because, I certainly been there myself. When you don't know how to draft, you just stay with your first couple picks, and you end up with a bad blue-green deck, right? Because those colors weren't open in this example. But once you have a better handle on things, and once you know how to read the signals, sometimes you will end up with a kind of light pack 1 on playables. The advantage to this, first of all, you're going to get paid off in pack 3 because these colors should be open pack 3. You just didn't know that when it started because you don't have perfect information. So you took blue and green cards because they were the best cards over, black and white cards, even though black-white ended up being open.
Yep.
So you end up here because you have one of those drafts where you're not going to end up with a great deck almost no matter what you do, and you did the best you could. So these are the drafts that are rewarding to draft because it feels good to figure these things out. Sometimes you open a Nissa and then you take like a Cyclone Sire, but blue and green are just so not open that there's no way you can end up with a good blue-green deck, but there's no way you could have known that. And of course you're going to first pick the best card out of the first two packs.
Right.
So,
And I want to point out that this also is probably the biggest place to gain your edge, right?
Because for sure. Many people will just train wreck themselves.
Exactly. They just won't move out of the two colors from their first two picks, and they'll just drive their draft into the ground. But the good players are able to salvage and gain a lot of win percentage by being flexible. And even if it doesn't feel perfect, it's like much better to be set up for the next two packs rather than shoehorning yourself into something that you can't get out of.
So the kind of worst case scenario here, I mean, and there's a lot of different ways to get here, which is why there's only one worst case scenario. What is that you have 2 to 3 cards in like 3+ colors and you don't really have a sign of where you should be.
Ugh, hate that.
And it happens too. Sometimes just like the draft's just incomprehensible.
Yep.
People are switching colors all over. The packs are strange. You think that maybe one color is open, but you really just don't have an idea about the rest. Like, this is tough. And there are ways to salvage this. And again, not every draft goes smoothly. Some go, in fact, the opposite of smoothly. So a couple ways to look at these is, first of all, if you open a bomb, you're gonna grab it and run with it. Like, you have nowhere that you need to be going. And the worse your deck is, the more that having a bomb increases the win percentage.
That's right. You need to take those higher risk things.
So
at this point,
if you end up with a really bad pack one, then at that point you just have to kind of hope that you open or see a card that can pull you out of it. And if you don't, then you just kind of have to pick a couple colors and go. It's tough, but sometimes you end up there. The other bad place to be, by the way, that is the reason it's almost not on the list is that it's really hard to tell. And the better you get at draft, the more often you're gonna be able to tell. You think you're in the first seat that we mentioned. You think you open blue-green, you're happy, things are good. The reality is you're actually getting cut. You don't realize that. You just have your first picks and some pretty subpar cards, but you're unable to identify that, and then you're just going to get completely screwed in pack 3.
Yeah, because you feel like, well, I've got enough playables, so I'm okay, even though, of course, you'd rather be getting good cards past you, so...
Yeah. So
that's the worst case scenario for sure.
That's the hapless fool, like, whistling his way down and and just has no clue in the world that he's about to get ambushed. So
yes.
So where to next? We just finished pack 1. There's a lot of explanation there, and you're going into pack 2.
Yep.
Their first direction to go: stick to your colors. Again, you've got 2 open colors. You think they're open at least. And you draft them. The draft isn't very hard. Like, this is not a very tough place to navigate from. So that's fine. The second one is you are nearly monocolor, as we said. And you go with whatever bomb you see first, and you end up, or if you don't see a bomb, you just you prioritize. Again, we use the example of you're almost mono red. You prioritize red cards, but once you see a good enough card of another color, you take that. Or let's say you had one good black card, and then you see another decent black card. All right, I'll take that to go in that direction. This one's a little tougher in that you still have to figure out where you're going.
Yes.
But it's easy in that if red was really that open, it's really hard to get too screwed, especially since you really cut red. So red should be open pack 2 also.
Yep.
And here's where I have to talk about another really super underrated move, which I know I've talked about before, but I really love doing because people still just don't do it enough. And that's drafting a color you know is cut off. And that seems like it flies in the face of what we're talking about, but it really doesn't. So you drafted all red cards pack 1. You know white's getting cut because you saw 0 playable white cards. Guess what? The person to your left also saw 0 playable white cards except for maybe whatever you opened or whatever they opened. They're probably not drafting white either. And maybe even the person to their left isn't. So all of a sudden, you've got a couple people who are going to pass you a bunch of white cards in pack 2. And what you can do is you can take all the good white cards in pack 2, and then in pack 3, you can just go back to taking red cards because red was super open.
Yep.
So this is
that's
really,
such
really
a sweet
effective.
move. I love that.
It feels awesome because it takes advantage of the person to your right cutting off a color. And
which is what they're supposed to do, by the way.
But you're like one of those parasitic fish that just like gloms onto a bigger fish and just
you're just along for the ride.
Yep. They did all the hard work of cutting off the color, and you reap all the rewards. And the reason,
and you should,
the goal is not to cooperate. The goal is to get the best deck.
That's right. And often that is done through cooperation, but there are exceptions, and Luis is pointing out a very important one here.
The prisoner's dilemma, sometimes defecting is the best choice.
Indeed.
And in this case, you want to do that. And the reason that it works, the reason that it won't work in a lot of cases where, we're saying, hey, identify what's open and draft what's open, is that you identified a color that's not open, but super open. And that is the in this example, the red, where you're confident that you can get enough playables in red in packs 1 and 3, and even in pack 2, you're probably going to pick up a couple cards that you're going to end up with a good deck. So you don't need 11 cards out of your second color. You just need like 6, and you could easily get that out of pack 2. Mm-hmm. So I love pulling this maneuver. It's just awesome, and there are times when you definitely should do it.
Yes, for sure. Just another benefit of being heavy in one color.
Yes.
Coming out of pack 1.
Another thing to look at in pack 2 is if things are going badly, if you're in the example we said where you've got like 3 or more potential color options and you don't have a ton of cards, like you don't have a really set direction, pack 2 ends up being somewhat similar to pack 1, where you're just looking for signals, you're looking to take a bomb if you see it. But the difference is you've kind of used up the time that you normally have to decide these things. At the end of pack 1, you do not have to have been decided on your colors. About 3 or 4 picks into pack 2, you kind of do. Mm-hmm. You're just going to not have enough playables. So here you're in the unenviable position of just having to choose. And you really just can't spend a lot of time waffling. You already did that. You had a pack 1. You couldn't figure something out. It's tough, but you just have to commit. And you just have to stop trying to keep open because you just can't anymore.
Yeah.
Another difference between pack 2 is you're actually starting to pay attention to things like mana curve and needs of your specific deck. Not that you shouldn't have paid attention to these things already to some degree, but pack 2, you actually get a much, much clearer view. This is where you're taking a decent 2-drop over a good 4-drop because you have enough 4s, or you're taking a colorless land over a good card because you already have 2 blinding drones. You're just looking to the needs of your deck and what each specific deck wants.
Yeah, and in my mind, you're starting to form that picture, right? Because as you get those last few picks out of pack 2, that's when your brain should start switching into that mode of, well, what does this deck need? Not what's necessarily just the best card in the pack. That will still often be the correct thing to do, but there are way more exceptions to that made in the third pack than there are in the first. In the first, it's all about power level. You're just grabbing the best stuff you can. But in the third pack, you are going to have to pay a lot more attention. And this is where that thought process begins, is as you sort of round third base on the second pack, you can start to see the things that your deck might be missing or lacking or could use a little bit more of.
Exactly. And, when I draft on Magic Online, I always sort, once I kind of figure out what colors I am, I kind of sort by cost and try to fill things out from there.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And this is really where you kind of get down to the nitty gritty of that.
Yeah.
And this is way more often. This is where you have the context and you are taking cards out, that are different from the pick order we had outlined in the beginning, because cards now move up and down based on what you need.
Exactly.
So you've finished pack 2. And at this point, you really should know what you're doing.
Yes.
If you don't, you're in trouble.
You're in big trouble if you don't have a pretty darn good view of what your finishing deck is going to look like, or hopefully would look like.
And and that makes pack 3 is the easiest pack to draft, because in pack 3 you're not jumping into new colors unless something really strange is happening, and you already kind of know what you're looking for, especially at the very least in terms of color/clan/guild, but also in terms of what does your deck need. You have a much better picture of that too. This is the pack where you're like, I just need any 2-drop. I need to fill out my curve. I've got a bunch of Saddleback Lagox. I would kill for a 2-drop. I'm taking McKinsey Slide Runner over Outnumber or Stone Fury, that sort of thing. Yes,
totally. And this is also where you're going to note that you need removal sometimes, right? A lot of times your deck will look pretty good and you're like, wow, I just don't have any way to get creatures out of the way or to kill them. Or you look at your removal suite and you think, okay, this is pretty good removal. But then when you look a little closer, you realize it's all reality hemorrhages and Searing Lights or whatever, where it's like you can kill small things, but if they play an Eldrazi, you just can't possibly kill it. Or if they play some 5-drop or whatever, you can't kill it. And these are the things that you're going to take over maybe a better card, right? Like maybe you open up a really solid uncommon that you'd love to have in your deck, but you just know, I got to take the Demon's Grasp here. I got to have some way to kill something. I can't just, this deck isn't going to function the way I want it to. You know, if your deck's really fast, full of combat tricks, maybe you can get away with that. But if you're going for like your sort of typical mid-range deck, you are going to need some answers. You just are. And you might have to prioritize removal spells that you don't really like that much. Same thing with Curve. Curve's the other really big component that you're going to be looking for as you start to open up that third pack. Again, power level still reigns supreme. You are looking to add power level to your deck. You are. You're hoping to open a bomb on color or get past one, that does happen in pack 3. You get past a really great bomb because people are so solidified in their colors. You know, even if it's 2 people away, if somebody opens up a Linvala, they're like, shrug, I'm in blue-red. They pass it. The next person's in black-green. They're like, yeah, whatever. They pass it. You're in white. And you're like, sweet, I got a third pick Linvala. These things happen, right? In pack 3, where it's really difficult for them to happen in pack 2, and they never happen in pack 1, basically. So this is where the gap goes from tiebreaker to bigger. Like you said, Luis, sometimes you need a 2-drop to fill out your support deck or whatever it happens to be. And you're going to take a mediocre 2-drop over a pretty decent whatever else card because you have to have this to make your deck function. And you need to know that going into the third pack. That's what you should be thinking about. You're going to be thinking about, what does this deck need? What am I missing? Is it removal? Is it cheap removal, expensive removal? Is it a top end? Maybe you're a ramp deck that doesn't have a ramp target yet. And in this case, you'd be willing to spend a pick on like an Eldrazi Devastator or something that you wouldn't normally want. And yeah, you're hoping to open up, you know, an Ulamog or whatever, but sometimes you just have to suck it up and take a 7 or an 8 drop that you know at least will do something.
I hate taking 7 drops. Actually, you know, in the not first, but I guess, second, I think, draft I did in this format, I took a Ruin Processor over an Eldrazi Sky Spawner when I was blue-red.
Oh my god.
Because I had Kozilek's Return, and I was playing a really controlling deck, and I just needed a finisher.
Oh, there you go.
And you know, I was happy about that pick, but you would never make that pick before.
No.
Like, you can't make that pick in pack 1 under no circumstances. Obviously, that's not the same format, but in Triple BFZ, you could never make that pick, you know, in pack 1.
Yep.
So.
Another thing you'll be looking for is fixing, mana fixing if you are splashing. Or if you happen to be drafting a format that requires, you know, that encourages you to play 3 colors or more, this is where you're going to be prioritizing that. In this format, in Oath of the Gatewatch as an example, this might be, you know, a pack where you're looking to pick up some Scion Makers if you have a couple of one-off activations of colorless cards that you haven't quite supported, that kind of thing. So these are all the things, you know, and there's more, right? And so you're going to really want to figure out what it is before you open up that third pack that you're looking for, and not just autopilot. Because if you just take the best card in your colors out of every pack, I mean, you're not giving up a ton, but you could lay out your deck and have no 2-drops, which is a major issue. You could have no big top end on your ramp deck or on your control deck, and that's an issue too. Card draw might be something. So a lot of different examples, but you need to know what you want and be willing, and you need to be willing to prioritize those things over cards that you would never pick them over.
So the last part is deck building. And if you've ever watched my stream, it takes me about 15 seconds.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
That's because in Magic Online, you can build your deck while you're drafting.
Yeah, it's already built.
Honestly, but even when I do a live draft, it does not take me very long. Because the more attuned you get to this, the more practice you have, I think the more likely you're going to be in this spot. But I tend to build the deck while I draft, even whether it's in my head or like after pack 2, you know, you have 2/3 of the cards you're going to see. I've got a lot of my deck laid out. Go into pack 3, I take the cards, and then I just build my deck afterwards. So you shouldn't be surprised during deck building. This is not sealed deck building.
Yes.
That reminds me. A brief foray into Grand Prix San Jose, the team Grand Prix, where, you know, the finals, it's me, Paul Chian, and Eric Froelich. We do a team draft, and Paul lays out his black-green deck, and then it ends up he's actually like a black-blue deck. It was like building a sealed, but anyway, that's not the normal case.
Not what you want, no.
For the most part, you should know like the first 20 pretty easily, and then figure out the last like 2 to 4 cards, you know, by laying out the deck and making sure there's no little adjustments, figure out your mana base, that sort of thing. But deck building is not the most difficult part of draft.
No, it's really not. Those last few slots do matter, and you need to be willing to put the time in to make sure that those are correct. But realistically, 20 of your cards are just set up anyway. You know that you're playing them in. And I do think that it is a sign that something maybe didn't go great if you find yourself completely throwing different builds at a deck in draft. Your mentality should be to work your way to the point where when you're drafting your deck, you're building it as you go, and either in your head or in between. At my local card shop, we play Magic Online rules. You can look at your pack if you want, to see what colors you are, see what your curve looks like. And when I play in drafts like that, also side drafts, that's often the case. I'll just start sorting my cards as I go. Like I'll just it's 2, 3, 4, 5, and I can get a feel for what I've got that way too. It's similar to Magic Online.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what are the takeaways here, right? We've now walked our way through an entire draft, sitting down for the draft. What are we thinking about? Then we've gone through pack 1, pack 2, pack 3, and even built our deck, and which takes us to our first match. What are the takeaways for our listeners here about what they should be thinking about for the full draft process?
All right. Well, the first one is know where you're at each point in the draft, and I always harp on having a plan during gameplay. You should have a plan during draft. I don't mean a plan as in how you're going to draft, because I know I'm going to be black-white is definitely not the attitude you want to have, but know why you're doing each thing. Know why you're taking each card. So understanding like what your goals are, where you're aiming to be, why, what information you're getting out of each pack is just really important, and knowing where you're at in the draft is key to that. Identify what's being cut and what is not being cut. It's important to know that white's being cut even if you were not planning on drafting it. Or it's important to know that blue is open even if it looks like you're going to be black-red. Like, these are all things that could be relevant to you, because who knows what can happen in pack 2. And sometimes you can switch, or figuring out a place to audible to is very important. So just pay attention to what's happening in the draft. And at some point, you're going to tunnel vision. You're going to say like, hey, look, I'm black-red. I don't care about the rest, and that's fine. But at least in the first pack, 2 packs, knowing what's going on and what other people around you are trying to do is really important.
Yeah.
And then understand what your options are. How do you adjust to these things? So, you can stay the course. You can say like, look, I'm going to stay in black-red. Pack 1 went decent. It didn't go insane, but I think black-red's open enough. Or you can say like, look, I've got to move out of black-red. I've got to move into black-green because, green actually ended up being really open. I got 3 late green cards, and I think green's going to be a good color to move into. Or, do the my favorite maneuver, which is move in on white even though it got completely cut pack 1, because you think you can get enough black cards to have a good black-white deck even though you're not getting white in pack 3. Or know how bad or good your deck is to know whether you should switch into red for that Chandra. The worse your deck is, the better that looks. So just kind of understanding a lot the wide range of options you have. And again, we talked about a lot of common ones here that I believe and you believe will cover most of the cases. But there's a lot you can do in draft, and you're certainly not limited to the options we presented.
Yeah. And one of the things that I use as a trick, and I would recommend to the listeners as well, is to ask yourself questions at certain points during the draft and be willing to deal with whatever the answer happens to be. There are times definitely where I've been drafting on stream and said, well, white's, we're in white because white's open. And then thought to myself, is white open? And looked at my cards and realized that white wasn't open. That just because I happen to have some number of white cards in my pile, it actually wasn't the case. And if I hadn't asked that question or made that statement, as it were, I may not have just come to the very easy realization. Like upon reflection, it's obvious. But if you don't get your brain will start to lead you down these pathways of we're drafting white, we're drafting white, we're drafting white, because you've got this isolation zone, and your brain just sort of ticks that box and goes on to autopilot. But if you actually question yourself, you can find your way out of it. And then I like the idea of asking yourself, what do I need going into pack 3? That way it takes you out of that autopilot mentality again of being like, well, I'm black-green and I'm going to take good and black-green cards and just see what happens. It's like, no, you actually have some flexibility here. And is there anything that this deck is sorely lacking? If there's not, hey, great, just take the best card and move on. But there are a lot of times where you find that your deck does need something going into game 3. And I think a way to sort of come to that conclusion is to ask yourself before you open up the third pack, what is it that my deck actually needs? And then it gets your brain moving in a direction that's something other than, again, just autopiloting on, colored picks or whatever. Okay. Good. Hopefully that was helpful. This is I use all of these things. I think about all of these things every time I draft. And the really cool part about it is you start doing most of this subconsciously. You don't have to, think about these things over and over. They just kind of come to you.
This sounds like a lot of information because, it's a lot of information, but, a lot of it is stuff you can internalize pretty easily. And, a bunch of the stuff is, I bet people are doing this without really thinking about it. And one of the parts about teaching something is trying to break it down into what actually is happening and explaining it, because I certainly knew a lot of these things before I knew these things.
Totally. So
I think that a lot of our listeners will find the same. We might be presenting this like fairly long list of habits or things to think about, and it might sound like a lot, but then you look at what you actually do in a draft and you're like, oh no, I actually do a lot of this. I just didn't realize it.
Yep. All right, that is going to do it for the show this week. I want to remind you that the show is brought to you by channelfireball.com. Make sure you check out the website for a full selection of singles, free, awesome content. You can find sealed product. You can find apparel, including limited resources. T-shirts are available there in all the sizes that we ordered. So if you want to, kind of let your value flag fly, you can go and find those T-shirts. And also, of course, they have a whole bunch of awesome stuff. You can also sell your cards, is what I meant to say. Us drafters tend to accumulate a lot of rares, and if you want to turn them back into sealed product or singles, you can do so very easily on channelfireball.com. If you want to find us on social media, my name is Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. If you want to say hi to us at GP Houston, if you're going to be there, or GP Detroit, make sure you do so. As long as we're not on the air, we're always happy to have a quick chat with a listener. Yes, I will look at your draft deck if you want to see it. I've looked at 100 of them, but I'll be quick. I'll tell you that. That's going to do it for the show this week. We'll be back next week with maybe the seal deck episode. We're going to see if we can get enough of them in. Luis and I are itching to do that episode, especially since the
sealed leagues are back.
Sealed leagues are coming back. We'll talk about that. Also, the Team Sealed GP is coming up next month, and we've gotten some requests to kind of touch on that as part of the Sealed Deck episode. But we also want to make sure that we've done enough Sealed Decks. I think I've done 3 since the pre-release, which isn't quite enough for me to feel confident in talking about it. So I'll do a few more, and we'll probably.
It's enough for you to sound confident.
I've never really been really good at pretending that I knew about stuff. All right, but that's going to do it. We'll see you next week.
Marshall, do you like trivia?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's grown popular here is people have been going out to do trivia, and so I put together a nice little couple magic trivia questions for you.
Ooh, okay.
And if you get some of these wrong, then I'm gonna doubt your commitment to the show. But
okay.
Let's start with one of the widest range here. How many magic cards are there with converted mana cost 10 or greater? 36, 48.
Oh, it's multiple choice, thank God.
60 or 72.
I'm going to say 36.
There are 48.
Damn it.
What is the average power and toughness of an elk? 2-2, 2-3, 3-3, or 4-4?
I am going to say 3-3.
You're correct. It's 3.08/3.
I would have said the smaller one, except for Axebane Stag.
Yep,
really,
Axebane Stag really pushes the boundaries.
Yeah.
As a fun fact, by the way, the average power and toughness of a bear is 3-4. The average power and toughness of an ape is 1-2, and then crabs had too small of a sample size to draw a meaningful conclusion.
That's great.
All right, this is a big one.
Okay.
Manowar was printed in how many sets? 2, 3, 4, or 5?
Oh my God. I am going to say 3.
Incorrect. It was in Visions, Starter 1999, Portal, and Vintage Masters.
Wait, there's one that's missing.
It was in the beatdown box sets, but I did not count those as
what
as
about was it in a dual deck or something, or is
it was in a Jace vs. Chandra dual deck?
Oh, that's what you meant. Okay, yeah. Okay, that doesn't count as a set. Oh, I hate myself.
I thought you liked me more, but I guess
bad.
I guess not.
Yeah.
Though I will admit that if you had said 4, I would have said it was only printed in Vision, Starter, and Portal, because Vintage Masters was not printed; it was just online.
Wait a minute. Yeah. Hey, I certainly wasn't counting online sets.
Yeah.
I'm definitely claiming victory on
Nope.
that one.
According to Gather, it was for the Trivia Master has ruled.
Okay.
All right. This ruling refers to which card? Quote, if a player has less than 5 lands, they get to pick and keep all of their lands. Quote.
Limited resources.
And there we go.